Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you. You're watching a brand new episode of Encounter. Today, our guest is Dr. Vedika Erdoyal Chekori, who is the head of the School of Indological Studies at the MGI. Dr. Vedika, a very warm welcome to you and thank you for being here. What is the Department of Indological Studies at the MGI? It sounds a very fancy name.
Okay. So first of all, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on this very prestigious platform. And coming to the School of Indological Studies, it is one of the 5 schools of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute. And the School of Indological Studies is mainly dealing with the studies of Indian culture, Indian languages, for instance, Sanskrit, the study of philosophical traditions in schools. So we are also working on areas like Ayurveda, Vastu, etc.
Oh, fantastic. And this leads us nicely to the topic we will be speaking today. So Dr. Vedika is here to share her knowledge about the Upanishads from India. So basically, growing up, and especially through all the guests that we have had on Encounter, we have heard of many scriptures from India. We've heard of the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, but we don't really know where they are found, how to locate them, and where they stand in the Indian mythology, or if I'm using the right word, in the Indian scriptures. So maybe you could shed some light on all the confusion that there might be. First, let's begin with a brief definition of what is or what are the Upanishads?
Okay, certainly. Literal meaning of Upanishad is to sit devotedly at the feet of a guru.
All right.
So the term Upanishad is composed of 3 words. You have Upa, Ni and Shada. Upa, which means proximity. Ni means Ni which means near, with humility, with devotion, and Shad means to sit. So Upanishad means to sit devotedly at the feet of Guru. So during the ancient times, there was this Guru Shishya Parampara, where you had the Guru who is sitting under a tree by the side of a lake or a river, and the Shishya, that is the student or the seeker of truth, who comes with humility, who approaches the Guru with humility so that he is imparted the knowledge, not ordinary knowledge, not academic knowledge, but what we can say as wisdom. So what is the scheme of Upanishad? What is the position of Upanishad in the whole scheme of, I would say, Indian philosophy? So it is good to know that we start with the Vedas, which is the edifice or the foundation of Indian culture, Indian philosophy, or Indian civilization for that matter.
All right.
So Vedas, they are the Shruti texts.
The Shruti?
Shruti. Well, Shruti is a Sanskrit term with a verbal root Shrinu. And Shrinu means that which has been heard.
All right.
So Shruti means that which has been heard. The question arises, heard by whom?
Exactly.
Yes.
And who said what?
Exactly, I'll be telling about that. So it was heard by the Vedic seers.
Okay.
When they were in deep meditation, in deep trance, or you can say high level of high intuitive level. So they heard these utterances. They mentally recorded these utterances, and they verbally transmitted these utterances to their disciples. That's the way, through this verbal transmission, that the knowledge of Vedas was transmitted from one generation to the other,
right,
until it was recorded in the written format. Now, there are many reasons behind this. It is not an ordinary utterance, as we can already see, you know. So when we talk about Vedas, we also refer to it as something which is apaurushaya. Apaurushaya, again, it's a Sanskrit term, which means that it is not man-made. See, everything that is man-made is prone to error.
Yes.
Probably prone to contradictions.
Okay.
But Vedas are not man-made, which implies that the Vedas are infallible.
Okay.
They are non-erroneous. And that is the reason the whole Indian culture is based on the authority of the Vedas.
I have to ask you, how old are the Vedas?
Well, to give a precise time would be a practical impossibility. So we may assign it to the as old as the civilization, perhaps 5,000 years ago.
In the modern times, can we say that it was those ancient gurus and who had so much wisdom, they were able to hear? So can you say that they were able to download it and put it into writings? But I have to ask you, is it also similar for, let's say, the Bible or the Quran? I'm not comparing, but they have all come down from very divine sources.
Yes. So
is there similarity in all of these?
well, I will try to contrast it since you have asked me this question. See, when we are talking about philosophy or Indian culture, I know religion forms part of it, but when we're talking about Upanishads, it has nothing to do with religion. It's not religion per se. It's rather a way of living. But when we're talking about other religions, which are Abrahamic, okay, there we are believing that there is a God. There is at least one God. So there are three constituents of a religion. You need to have at least one God.
Yes.
You need to have one sacred scripture, and you need to have a messenger of God.
Of course.
That is, let's say that these are the factors that one has to conform to be known as a religion. But let us have a quick look at Hinduism.
Okay.
In Hinduism, how many gods do we have? We do not have one. We have, it is a polytheistic civilization.
Hundreds of thousands of gods.
Hundreds, very right, hundreds and thousands of gods. We do not have one scripture for that matter. No. We are starting with Vedas, we'll go to Upanishads. You mentioned earlier about Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
So already we defeat the possibility of having only one scripture. And therefore, in Hinduism, there is no place for prophet. Of course, we have seers, Vedic seers, saints and sages.
Of course.
So probably it's, they are not parallels in that matter, okay? So that is why Hinduism is, in a way, very, how to say, inclusive, very democratic, very Catholic also. Yes. Because it is open to whomsoever adopts it as a way of living. Okay. So there is no hard and fast rule that you have to believe in this God, you have to perform these rituals, or it's sort of preaching. There is science. You're talking about science, your focus is on science.
We will get there also.
It's logic. So it is about all these things.
It's probably one of the ways of living when you can also ask questions about what you know. You will ask about what is the science, what is the logic behind doing things. It's not.
Yes.
Anyways, we will get deeper into the topic,
Sure.
but before that, we will invite you and we will also invite the guests watching us to have a look at the following report on the Upanishads. The word Upanishad primarily signifies knowledge, yet by implication it also refers to the book that contains that knowledge. The Upanishads teach the truth unknown to the sense organs regarding living beings, the universe, and God. They describe the nature and attributes of Brahman, its reality and manifestations, its powers and aspects. They also describe the creation, preservation, and ultimate dissolution of the universe and the changes and modifications of nature, Prakriti. Furthermore, the Upanishads deal with the development of the individual soul, jiva, its evolution and its destiny, its bondage and its freedom. The relationship between matter and spirit, between God, the universe, and the living beings also belong to the subject matter of the Upanishads. These concerns relate to everything that a man doesn't know in his everyday state of consciousness. Yet the good and evil of a man depends in a special manner upon his knowledge of these things. For man is rooted in a reality far deeper than is apparent to the senses. Just as only a small portion of an iceberg is visible, so only a small portion of man is available to the senses, no matter how they may be magnified. The solution of many of our most vital problems must come, therefore, from regions beyond the scope of the ordinary faculty of reason. Welcome back, and you're still watching Encounter, and we are still discussing about the Upanishads. Dr. Vedika, before the report, we were speaking about where do we situate the Upanishads, the Vedas. Is the Bhagavad Gita a condensed version of the Upanishads? But maybe we have to go to the Vedas first. I have so many questions for you.
No, that's okay. No problem, absolutely. Well, yes, so to take it again from the Vedas, I was saying that they are infallible and they are even considered as authoritative texts.
Okay.
So it is good to know that the Vedas are classified into four parts. So we have the first part, which is known as the Samhita. So the Samhita is a collection of mantras, the hymns.
Yes.
Followed by the second part, which is known as Brahmanas. The Brahmanas, they are like the collection of injunctions and prohibitions, and they complement the mantras. As in, you are not going to only recite the mantras, but they are sometimes accompanied by rituals. So what is to be done, what ought to be done, what not to be done. So that is taken care under the part of the Brahmanas. Then we have a third part, which is known as Aranyaka. Now, this is a transitory part, or it represents the transitory phase. Now, which transition? When we spoke about the Samhitas and the Brahmanas, they represent the ritualistic aspect of the Vedas.
Yes.
The sacrifices, the yagnas, And then these Aranyaka lead us to the Upanishads.
Okay.
Upanishads are the fourth and the last part of the Vedas. And that is the reason they are also known as Vedant. Ved plus Anta means Vedant. And Vedant is synonymous to Upanishad.
Okay.
So Upanishads now, they deal with the intellectual or the philosophical or the speculative aspect of the Vedas. So as you can see, we have the ritualistic perspective of the Vedas and the knowledge perspective of the Vedas. So Upanishads, they are directly related to that. In fact, the Upanishads are known to be the cream of the Vedas.
All right, let's see if I understand this well. So you have all the sounds, then you have the mantras, because when you have the sounds, you should be able to know how to recite them properly.
Yes. Yes.
And also you have the transition, but before that also, when you have the ritualistic in the second part,
The mantras
they
and
also,
ritualism.
they also empower the rituals, empower what you recite, because you should know what you're reciting and why you're reciting.
Very right, very right.
And the transition part is, as you just explained, and the last one on the Upanishads is probably where you get the critical thinking.
Yes, very right. The critical thinking, the speculative.
The speculative.
aspect.
So you have the part where you have the guides and directives, but also you're able to understand it in your own way,
Yeah.
because there's not only one way of understanding.
Absolutely right.
So everyone is different. Everyone
Yes.
has a way of adapting to a specific thing.
Yeah, everyone is free to formulate his own way of living.
You had mentioned the four, how do you call it, the four categories, the four sections of
The four sections, the
of
four
Vedas.
parts, even the four categories or the classifications of the Vedas.
All right.
So we have a fourfold classification. If you want to have a more simplified, you simply divide it into two. The ritualistic, which is called as the karma kand, and the gyan kand, the knowledge aspect. Every individual has his own predisposition. Some people want to approach, want to know the reality through performance of rituals, rites and rituals. Maybe the path of devotion appeals to them most. But some people, they try to go by the way of knowledge, of logic, categories of understanding. So it is, again, very open. If that suits you, you take that path, ritualism. If meditation suits you, you take the path of meditation. If action suits you, you take the path of action. If knowledge suits you better, you are free to choose. Even if you want to make a synthesis, you're open for that.
Listening to you, I'm probably realizing right now that I should have spoken about the Vedas first and then come to the Upanishads, because the Upanishads are part of the Vedas.
Are part of the Vedas.
But then I
Last
realized that
part
it's
of the-
too big to deal with in terms of the Vedas. We could speak weeks and weeks on about it and still not.
True.
So the question comes now, why is the Bhagavad Gita, no disrespect to the Bhagavad Gita, but in the modern world, the Bhagavad Gita is much more popular than the Upanishads and the Vedas. What is the reason for this?
Let us understand it in this way. Earlier I was talking about the Shruti texts. We learned about what Shruti means. And then parallelly, we have a different type of text known as Smriti text. Smriti means memory, so that which has been remembered. So under the Smriti text, we have the epics that you mentioned earlier, like Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And interestingly, they are authored. They have authors. The author of Ramayana is sage Valmiki.
And Tulsidas.
And Tulsidas, right, he is the author of the Ramcharitamanas. And Vedvyasa is ascribed to be the author of the Mahabharata. Now, coming to your question about the Bhagavad Gita, the celestial song, the dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, it is part of the Mahabharata.
Yes.
Okay? And
it's right before the war.
Right before the Kurukshetra.
Right before the Kurukshetra war.
Very right, yes. So, and I agree on your comment that it is more popular, that Bhagavad Gita is more popular than Upanishads. And there are some reasons behind this. Now, the Bhagavad Gita is very contextual.
Yes.
In the sense that we know that Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, the battlefield of Dharma and Karma. We also have Lord Krishna, where people connect with Lord Krishna, the incarnation of Lord Vishnu, yes. takes us on a mythological ride, if I can say so.
It is, yes.
Okay, but when we're talking, so we connect quickly with that, and all these ideas of disputes, conflicts, we also encounter on our daily life, on our personal life. So we want to probe deeper and to know what happened in the Bhagavad Gita, what has been the solution proposed. And you see, Bhagavad Gita has also been translated in a very simplified form in different languages. Now, coming to the Upanishads, I would say that, first of all, original Vedas, they are in classical Sanskrit. Okay. Decoding classical Sanskrit is a task. So, the Upanishads, they deal with the very fundamental questions that mankind could have ever asked. For instance, how arises this universe? How was this world created? Or who created this world? What is that spiritual spark in me, which is also in you, for that matter, is with everyone, within everyone? What is karma? What is death? Is there a world beyond? Is this empirical plane of existence the only level of existence? Or do we have other parallel worlds, other different levels of existences?
With all these questions, so do you get those answers when reading the Upanishads, or do they guide you towards the answer?
They definitely guide us towards the answer. So certainly the answers are there.
I have to ask you, how did you discover your passion for ancient scriptures? I mean, it's very rare nowadays, and even less in Mauritius. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
All right. It started in the beginning of my career, my academic career, and also as a young researcher, where I had to empower, first of all, empower myself for teaching and learning. So I was teaching, I have a specialization in Western philosophy, and I wanted to consolidate my knowledge in Indian philosophy. And without the knowledge of Sanskrit and Vedanta, Indian philosophy doesn't seem to be very easy. So there's a saying which says that if the student is ready or the disciple is ready, the guru arises. Yes. So something of that sort happened to me as well when I encountered Swami Rudratmananda. Okay, he was the former Indologist, Sanskritist, and philosopher in Mauritius, and he had this rare combination of the knowledge, having the knowledge of Sanskrit and Indian philosophy. So I studied Vedanta. I had studied Vedanta when I was a student in Delhi University. I studied Brahma Sutra. But the kind of grooming I got with Swamiji was traditional, at the same time very formal. So I learned about the prerequisites of becoming, first of all, a student of Vedanta, for that matter, a student of Upanishad. And I was taught, in a way, I was exposed to the world of Upanishads. And that made things easier for me, for my understanding. And as you're talking about my journey, I would like to add that that brought a transformation in my whole perspective about life. I sort of developed a broader horizon of thought. I became more critical. I started looking at things in a more critical manner rather than dogmatic way.
Okay.
So there was obviously an elevation from a religious perspective to a more spiritual perspective, from a more scientific perspective. And more importantly, while reading Upanishads and teaching Upanishads, the best thing I discovered is how could one have a master over his ego?
Okay.
So ego, which is the root cause of all our problems, it's the dualities, the multiplicities. So Upanishads teach us that, you see, the reality, the ultimate reality is one and it is all pervasive. The divinity in me is in you, is in everyone. So why differences? Why conflicts?
Okay.
Let us understand, let us appreciate, let us know the universal truth. So this is how I would say it started my encounter with Upanishads.
If you could summarize very briefly for our viewers, should everyone try to understand and read the Upanishads a bit? And you think it is important for everyone?
I would say that it is an imperative for everyone to take some time and explore the Upanishads. First of all, have no religious bias. It has nothing to do with religion. You know, it is a text, it is a philosophical text which help us probe into deeper questions, existential questions. I think everyone wants to know, who is he, who am I, for instance?
Yes.
Are we just the body? Are we just the mind? Are we just this matter? Do we have some higher purpose in life? Or do we have a certificate? We have a family? We have a position in the society? Is that enough? Do we have higher goals, higher purposes in life?
A noble mission in
Every
life.
human being is endowed with all these qualities or these missions, but unfortunately, many are stuck at the empirical level.
Right.
By empirical level, I mean they have a name, they have a fame, they have a status, they have a bank balance, and they'll be satisfied with that. Well, it's okay, basic needs everyone needs, but let us uplift ourselves. Let us experience what is called self-enlargement. Let us increase our consciousness. If we know certain things, we do have consciousness, but what is the degree of consciousness? Let us expand the degree of consciousness to see that unity, to experience that unity, that brotherhood, that universality.
Oh, beautiful. Well, we have already almost come to the end of this recording. I always say that time just flies every time we have a guest on Encounter. Before we wrap up, anything you would like to add? Because don't worry, we will have a second episode. Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up this first episode?
Just that, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Roshan.
Sure, welcome.
And also the MBC for bringing Upanishad on the Encounter. And I hope our listeners will benefit from this encounter of ours. And we will be at their disposal if ever they have queries or questions regarding Upanishads.
Sure, there will be an email address I will be providing shortly, but also in the second episode, probably we'll get deeper into the Upanishads and try to make a little bit more sense of it.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of this episode of Encounter. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. There will be a second episode with Dr. Vedika. But in the meantime, if you have any question, queries on the topic or on the guest, or even any suggestion for future encounters, drop an email. It's encounter@mbc.net.mu. Until the very next program, goodbye.